Iron Overload.ir hardcore number 40 coming your way. Today's going to be a fun one. We're going to talk about danger. Is home brewing really worth it? So, we're going to talk about this topic. And this is a topic that is very, very important to talk about because it's a legal issue, it's a quality issue, it's about what's going into your body. So, let's start out with the legality issue. So, in the US, we all know anabolic steroids, they're not legal unless you have a prescription for it. So it's just like any type of prescription medication, you can't just acquire it. Obviously you need a script from a doctor. But in this case, brewing, getting caught, getting pulled over with a couple of vials of testosterone is one thing.
Yeah.
But getting caught with 100 vials of testosterone or getting caught in your house brewing, having an operation where you're brewing all this crap, that's a whole nother story. So in terms of legality, so you can end up getting many, many years in prison if they go into your place and they catch you having an operation where you're brewing gear. Even if you're just brewing gear for you and your buddies, you can still get hit with many, many years in prison. But getting caught with a couple of vials of testosterone, unless you live in one of these states in the deep South or something where they're just itching to throw people in jail, right? They're not going to do like if you get caught in California with a couple of vials of testosterone, the cops probably just going to laugh and be like, all right, I'm out of here. But if you get caught like in Texas or, Alabama or something like that, or Tennessee, they're probably going to slap you hard for a couple of vials of gear. So I'm not saying drive around with vials of gear, but I'm saying if you're in Texas and they go into your trailer or your house and they find that you have an operation where you're brewing gear, they're going to charge you with a felony. So it's really, really serious. So that is the number one reason why home brewing is a bad idea. So, Mobster, why don't you talk about it on your side of the pond, how the laws are?
I think it's kind of the same, Steve. I mean, as you know, because we've discussed it on the forum previously, another podcast. My possessing steroids for personal use is kind of legal. It's one of those grey areas, and it's not really specifically defined in those terms, but it's kind of legal. I can actually go abroad to a country where I can buy steroids over the counter, and I can bring them back. And if I had a load, and I mean a lot, guys, providing I pay the VAT on them and declare them at customs, I can bring them into the country. But again, it should be for my use. And it's hard to argue when you've got a suitcase full versus, say, a little carry-on bag, guys, in terms of legality. But here's the same thing. The same thing as in the US. And I would argue, bearing in mind, guys, this is not to be construed as legal advice. It's an opinion that we're giving on this podcast. But for the most part, pretty much every country in the world would argue the same. Manufacturing, sale, and distribution of steroids is the place that will get you time in jail. It will get you fined. It will get you punished in some way. Even if the least that they do is take your steroids off you, there will be issues. The use of steroids in your own home for you, even in the States, as Steve said, and again, specific legalities, different places, literally sometimes from one officer to the next. I don't think Ronnie back in the day, Steve, would have given us too much of a hard time if he pulled our car over and found a vial of Tren in the car. You'd probably say how much you're using and where'd you get it from. You know what I mean? It's that kind of thing, guys. I mean, all joking aside, the sale, the manufacturing and distribution is the issue. Now, right here, and if it's just for you, never mind for your buddies, and I'll get onto that briefly in a second. Even if it's just for you, you are still manufacturing, even if you're only manufacturing for yourself. So the legality is an issue. Now, as Steve says, and this would make sense if I decided today that I was going to do it, Steve, in order for me to bring in the powders, I don't really want to bring in the powders for 3 vials, for a cycle. I want to bring in enough just to make it financially worth it, say for 10 or 15 or 100. Now, 10 might be enough for 2 or 3 cycles, and I could put some in my drawer and use it at another time. That might be the case. But if I want to bring in enough to make it financially worth it again, I might need to bring in enough to make 100 vials. Now, I don't want 90 vials sitting around the house doing nothing, 10 vials for a cycle. So then I might say, Do any of my buddies want it? And then we're getting into distribution. So that's an issue right there, guys. So the legality is, it's not really that much of a grey area. Manufacturing and distribution, especially if you take some money from your buddies, even if it's just for the cost of the raws and the vials and the carrier oil or whatever, you are still selling, manufacturing, and distributing. And now you've got problems. So the legality of home brewing is a problem in and of itself. So that's issue number one. Issue number two, which Steve and I are going to discuss now, is hygiene. I can show, you can go on YouTube, and I can think of two examples. I've personally seen both these videos. Hygiene was one where the guy was home brewing in his kitchen, and there was polythene sheets on the doors, on the surfaces, everything except the sink itself. And he was literally brewing products, Steve, either on the stove or in his kitchen sink. Now, guys, I'm going to inject an injectable into my body. And there's some argument with regards to our immune system. But ultimately, guys, if you're brewing in a less than lab-like environment, the risk for you just from your own hygiene is kind of high. And I'll give you another example, Steve. Dave Crossland, the UG Freak, did a great video. He did 2 documentary type videos. You can buy these in DVDs, guys. And one specifically, and I've talked about this scene before, is he goes to see a UGL. He goes to an underground lab up north, somewhere near Merseyside. And the guys are wearing balaclavas, and they're in a garage, a single car garage, Steve, with a coffee table, 2 chairs, and on the coffee table is a beaker with oil, and they pour the powder into the oil. They stir it with a glass stirrer, and then they zap it in the microwave. And he said, this might be a slight oversimplification for what we do, but that's kind of it. And the product that they'd zapped in the microwave, Steve, amounted to 250 milligrams a mil. And that was kind of it, Steve. I don't know that the beaker was hygienic. I have no idea if the microwaves have been cleaned, and they're doing it in a lock-up garage. And that was, and Dave sits there kind of almost shocked, saying, I knew it was a fairly simple process, but I didn't know it was that simple. I'm thinking, guys, you know they're not going to pour it away, Steve. You know they're going to bottle that stuff up. You know it's going to be sold. And you've just literally seen them make it on the video, and someone somewhere who might not have seen the video is going to buy that product. To me, that's like, oh my God. When we talk about approved sources, some of our approved sources do product in-house, and they have photographs of the process, the laboratory equipment, the building where the laboratory equipment is kept, and all that kind of stuff. That, to me, the difference in hygiene, the possibility of contamination is incredibly high. I've used home brewed product back in the States, Steve, and the person that made it for me, it was funny enough, just Anavar, which we talked about previously, was triple filtered. And then was the capsule was packed out with pure pharmaceutical standard creatine, just to bulk out the capsule that I was using. But he'd literally triple filtered this. He was telling me how he was manufactured. And again, homebrewed. So I've used homebrewed, made for me specifically for a competition. But again, even here, Steve, I would probably want to spend $5,000 setting up a space specifically for we need to want to brew inside that space. That it should be like a clean room in a laboratory. And guys, is home brewing in a clean room in a laboratory? No, it is not. So for that reason alone, Steve, the hygiene issue alone, much, much higher, especially when it comes to injectables. Orals, you can almost get away with, Steve, purely and simply because your digestion will break down certain particular things. But when you're relying on a sterile needle, using a sterile syringe, and then arguably potentially injecting something that is not sterile, and I want the product to be just about as sterile as it's possible to be. The same, we talk about pharmaceutical quality as the turn of phrase, guys, for a particular reason. We want in supplements, never mind steroids, to be pharmaceutical quality. In other words, as close to a pharma giant company with huge great brewing and bottling and capping machines and all the rest of that stuff, where they can be randomly tested by the authorities at any particular time. They have to have traceability That's just, Steve, they have that for baked beans in this country. I want that for my steroids. Home brewing, no. So what do you think about the steroid issue, Steve?
Quality, that goes in with quality. Look, we all think we can do everything great. There's three ways of doing things: the right way, the wrong way, and the things that you do it, right? We all have that mentality. That's why we use anabolic steroids. But at the end of the day, you got to remember, when it comes to this, are you going to be better at making this than a actual lab technician or a doctor or someone who has education in this field and who has experience in this field? Are you going to be able to put it in a facility which is as clean and as properly hygienic as as what they're going to do in an actual lab, a medical lab, where you have to basically, everything has to be wiped clean and it's got to be completely perfect, and it's inspected to make sure it's perfect. And there's, regulations to make sure that it's perfect. And if anything is off, then they're going to, change. You're going to have to change it and you're going to have to fix that. So are you going to be able to do that in your bathroom at home or in your basement? I mean, come on, let's be realistic. So quality is going to be important, even if you've got legitimate raws, okay? Even if you get your hands on legitimate raws, even if you're confident in your raws, is it going to come out the same? Is it going to be, come on, we got to be realistic here. And the truth is, it's not. You're never going to be able to make it as good as these professionals. When it comes to things in life, sometimes you have to hire. I'll give you an example: cleaning. Let's say, my situation, if I move somewhere and my old house that I moved out of, am I going to clean it, or am I going to hire some maids to come clean it, some professionals to come clean it? Because no matter how hard I try, I'm never going to quite get it as good as those professionals are going to do when they come. And it's the same thing with this. So quality, do you want to make testosterone at home and brew it and have it come out to be only 70 or 80% or even 90%? Or do you want it to be 97, 98, 99%? Like, that's the question. How do you want to do this? What do you want to put in your body? That's the question. And that's why quality is very, very important in this situation. And even if you do everything right, and even if you're better than the doctors, more than the doctors, right? More than the technicians. How do you know the quality that you're getting is right? How do you know that those raws are right? Even if your buddy brewed that same company, that same source, that same brand raw, how do you know that they're going to send you the same quality raw as they did him? How do you know they're not going to send you, even if you did it before and it was right, second time? How do you know they're not going to selective scam you? Oh, I've used this customer before. You know what? I'm just going to send them underdose stuff this time. He won't know the difference. I'm going to send them Dianabol. I'm going to send them Turinabol instead of sending him Anavar because it's way cheaper. Sourcing Anavar is way expensive. He's not going to know the difference. How do you know that's not going to happen to you? So why don't you touch on that, Mobster? Yeah.
I'll give you an example of just exactly what Steve said. I've seen a certain very, very well-known supplier of products from China, a very, very big company now, right up there with Amazon in terms of the volumes and the sales and the numbers that they do. And every single photograph is identical, Steve, because it's typically a white powder, like Steve said. So kind of like they could use the same photograph. And if they're doing it with photographs, they're probably doing the same thing with the product. And again, let me touch on the cost effectiveness. Sometimes, and I looked on the threads, because we obviously do show research for these podcasts, and the one place that I could say in the world that was kind of having problems importing decent product from a great lab, proof source or whatever else, was the Australia or New Zealand, Steve. And so the argument then became, if I can get the powder into the country, which in and of itself is difficult with Australian customs, then it might be worth for that place in the world them importing from China, from Thailand, from Korea, from wherever, a certain amount of raw powder. And again, I still want to test the powder, like Steve says, because who knows what I'm getting? Am I getting some inert substance with some effective steroid, or am I getting 100% pure? A great example again, Steve, is this only kind of works when we're talking about these kind of things when you're only manufacturing for yourself, homebrewed for yourself, one single steroid. And again, guys, for injectables, how many of you are only going to use one injectable on a cycle, you're probably going to use 2, possibly 3. So now you've got to import 3 lots of powder. So there's that. I mean, but let me do the cost effective. I can understand in a country like Australia or New Zealand, where it's really, really difficult to get products through customs, that you might maybe there see it as a cost effective thing. But for the rest of us, it's not. And I'll give you an example, Steve. We have approved sources. We recommend approved sources. And then here's the thing, guys, our approved sources have sales. So even if you moan and bitch and say, I don't want to pay the fee, the cost, both with shipping and maybe some variation in Bitcoin that company A is offering right now. Company A has weekend sales. Company A has Easter and Christmas sales. Company A does Thanksgiving sales. And some of those sales are 50% off, Steve. Some of them are, they're offering you X for free, 20% for free, 30% for free. But one of the sales we had literally in the last 7 days, as this podcast has been recorded, was 50%. That's half price, guys. Half price. You haven't got to worry about sterility. You haven't got to worry about the product actually being what it is. You haven't got to get it halfway across the world. Company in Europe, from me, or what we call the domestic market in the US, has product in America ready and waiting to come to your home, and it's half price. It's ready at 50% off. So you go from, say 60, 70, 80 bucks per vial is too expensive to 40 bucks. Now, tell me, guys, if you're not doing the sheer volume of home brewing, like I said at the beginning of this podcast, 100 vials, to make it worthwhile for you, never mind the fact you'd have a 90 vials sitting around the house, unless you share them and so on and so forth, are you creating in-house, in your kitchen, in your garage, in your in-house laboratory, call it whatever, enough to get it down to the price that you could get it for in the South on an approved source? I've got to say, Steve, I don't think so. The great and vast majority of every person in the domestic market in America or over here in Europe or other parts of the world, I can't see, guys, that you got, honestly, this is the order of the level that you'd probably have to import of one single steroid raw powder. It's going to have to be around a kilo, 1,000 grams, 100,000, is it 1,000 milligrams, basically a million milligrams. I think my maths is right there, Steve. In order for you to get it down to something close to the cost that you could have got it for in a half price sale from an approved source, it's not cost effective, guys. For the great and vast majority of our listeners, for the great and vast majority of the members on our forums, I can't see the cost effectiveness. Now, tell you what I think it is, Steve. Sometimes I think it's kind of almost a trust issue, and it's like me making beer. I could brew beer here. I could go out and buy a small barrel and all the specific gravity and all the rest of that kind of stuff. That stuff's kind of easy. And I think my dad did it back in the day. But it's the times so easy to go to the pub or the off license or your local store that you buy booze from, guys. And honestly, it's nice because you made it yourself. And I think that's why some home brewers do it, Steve, versus the actual reality of the quality of beer from a brewery, sold in your pubs, sold in an off license, sold in a club, sold in a bar, and the quality is going to be the same every single damn time. If you like that beer from that brewery, it's going to be the same every single damn time. And like I said, just on that alone, I still have to spend a couple of $100 in order to produce a beer that I can claim is only costing me 50 or 60p or a pound a pint or something like that. But in reality, it's not, because I spent all that money at the beginning, Steve. So, I mean, that's the thing. I don't know that I'd want to trust the importer, not be able to test the powder, because that's the cost right there. Bring it into the country, not get arrested, not get charged, make it in-house, hope it's sterile, and then find out that I could have had it for half price. That beats whatever deal that I worked out for myself, the numbers that I've kind of added up in my mind, and I ended up finding that it costs exactly the same, if not even slightly less, for me to get it, and without having to manufacture 100 vials just to get the cost down to something vaguely sensible. So I just can't see it. I can maybe see this is why some UGLs started that particular way, because the UGL was trying to brew stuff for themselves, ended up having to make 300 or 400 vials, and ended up selling it, and then become a lab, become So I'm going to ask Steve. Steve, what do you think about this cost-effective thing? Is it really, truly cost-effective for someone to homebrew versus being able to buy from an approved source? Normally,
Yeah.
never mind in the sale. What do you
So
think?
yeah, so things have definitely changed. I think back in the day, it was a lot harder to get steroids. Granted, I wasn't around, but when I first started, getting my hands on them, it was a lot more expensive. You had to order international. Just shipping alone cost a fortune. And then sources, if it got seized by customs, they wouldn't reship. So you're really taking a huge loss. And if things didn't go well for you, guess what? You're out $500-600 off each order or more. So things have changed a lot. Now we have access to so much inexpensive gear. There's always deals. There's discounts. You can buy 3 vials, get a 4th vial free. There's 50% off weekly deals. There's 30% off holiday deals. All kinds of ways. You can come on the forums and you can check out. You can come on Iron Oil Forum and you can check out all the approved sources that have been vetted, and they are not expensive. You pay a vial of gear, is not much more than getting your car washed. It's less than getting your car detailed, for crying out loud. I mean, it's less than your power bill. So I mean, it's become really, really easy to get, and it's just a click of the mouse. You can make the order. You can send the cryptocurrency through Bitcoin, which takes 2 clicks of the mouse, and boom, you'll have anabolic steroids delivered, to your PO box or to your door. So it's become so much easier, and it's much less risky. Legality, much risky what you're putting into your body. These sources, they're approved for a reason. They're produced in legitimate facilities and all that stuff. So I think when it comes to cost, you're going to save way more money and save way more headache and way more hassle in the long run if you just come on the forums and you order steroids from our legitimate sources and approved sources that we have on ironoverload.io. So come check that out for sure before you even think about doing this. I definitely think, Mobster, you will save a fortune over time doing that versus actually trying to brew this stuff on your own. And let's be honest, you're basically having someone else do the work and saving money. You can't beat it. It's like having someone come clean your house and you save money in the process. And you're saving a hell of a lot of time, and you're saving getting a felony on your record. So it's a no-brainer to do it this way. Just come on the forum and look for a source. Go ahead. Yeah.
Let me give you a piece of advice here, guys. And I've said this before, and you can actually use this in a bunch of other situations, never mind when it comes to buying PEDs. Right, so plan ahead. It's as simple as that. If a sale is offering 30, 40, 50% off, but you haven't got a cycle upcoming for ages, plan ahead. I've just come off cycle, Steve. I'm doing a PCT. I'm not going to use, I haven't got a competition for 12 weeks. Buy the products now when it's in a sale and put that stuff to one side. You've got a pretty good idea of what most of your next cycle is going to be. You can certainly start the first, if it's competition cycle, Steve, and me, and you've discussed it as another podcast, you could tweak that cycle, but you've got a pretty good idea what you're going to use at the beginning, the first 6, 7, 8 weeks, Steve. So you could buy those products now, plan ahead. We don't do this enough. And it's the reason why an awful lot of people, and I don't just mean in PED, Steve, get caught out with certain things. The analogy of the supermarkets only having 2 weeks, and if society broke down, that's it. That's all the food we'll be able to get access to. And if we lived on a farm and made it ourselves, grew it ourselves, that's kind of the home brewing situation. So here, this is where you're stockpiling. You can have in a sale, let's say, for example, they're doing a sale on cypionate, and you're on TRT. Stock up now. You don't have to wait till you're getting towards the end of your current stash. Stock up now. You're on TRT. You can buy enough in a sale to last you the next 12 months. It's the kind of sort of stuff like that, Steve, that I've got stuff here which I might not use right now, but has come to me as parts of deals and whatever else. I keep it cool, dark, dry places, like exactly like I suppose use all pharmaceuticals. And I can make sure that it's in date. I can rotate stuff in and out. So it's the stuff that's there now is the stuff that's being used is the shortest date. The stuff that's being stocked piled to one side is the longest date. Sometimes sources would do sales and it's a short store dated product. Then guys, if you've got a cycle coming right up real soon, there's your opportunity to save some bucks, get it down to that kind of home brew price that you've got in your mind and use it as soon as it arrives. So you've got all those different kind of options. For me, Steve, ultimately, I can't see home brewing really being worth it. For me to do it properly, I would need to spend, I'm going to say, Steve, I've got a huge amount of space here. As you know, I would need to take one of those rooms and I would need to turn it into a little lab. I would need to turn it into a little clean room. And I can't see me doing it even on the cheap for less than £1,000, 1,1400 bucks. I cannot see it. And that's before I get into the laboratory equipment that I'm going to need, the pill makers, the filters for the oils. These I would want a specific microwave if I was using such a thing just for that. And again, guys, if it's going to be like a lab, a pharmaceutical lab, then I don't use the same machine or the same equipment for each steroid. I would then need to replicate that for each steroid that I'm manufacturing in order to do it properly. I've been involved back in the day in food manufacturing. I know from my experience of the iron game and being around PEDs where companies have made mistakes, literally worldwide issues with tryptophan. Steve is a classic example where the company that was manufacturing the amino acid tryptophan, which was a great amino acid for helping people sleep, is in milk. And the reason why there were issues is because they hadn't cleaned out the manufacturing machine properly. And this was a huge company. What makes most home brewers 100% sure that their level of quality is even close to pharmaceutical, and then you'd have to manufacture it and the volumes. I just can't see it, Steve. There's, like I said earlier on, there's always going to be people that want to make stuff. Hell, guys, I make homemade ice cream here, but it's on a batch per batch basis, and it's just enough for 2 or 3 people to eat the ice cream. I'm not making 1,000 gallons at a time. And my homemade ice cream will be expensive compared to, say, something I could buy in a supermarket. It's probably a better quality, Steve, really tasty, but ultimately it's a luxury item. And that's what I think home brewing is for me. It's almost a luxury, Steve. I'd have to be that kind of person and inclined to manufacture it almost as a luxury item, just so I can say that I've made it. I can't see that the benefits in terms of price. I can't see the benefits in terms of quality. And again, you could argue back in the day, maybe I've had back in the day product that way. Equally, you and I both know, just I think, for example, Iranian Pakistani enanthate was always the golden standard back in the day, and we can get hold of that product now. We can go onto an approved source, look up the brand, get that, buy that approved source, shipped and
All right.
as always, guys, let us know what you think. Are you home brewing? What do you think the benefits are? Do you disagree with what Steve and I have got to say? Because we welcome that disagreement, guys. If you think that what you're doing is a better way, and you disagree with some of the points we made, please, by all means, come on and tell us so. Hell, we'll do another podcast if we're wrong. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, guys. So, but my opinion right now is that I think with the approved sources, honestly, Steve, what did we have back in the day? 4 or 5 different products, 1 or 2 labs that we were recommended to. I can go on one approved source and see 25 labs offering probably something like 200 versions of the different steroids that I used to have access only to 4 or 5 different steroids, never mind sources and products and different companies and brands and whatever else. So, guys, it's that much easier. And price-wise, I'm not seeing it. Like I said, you live somewhere maybe like Australia or New Zealand when the problems are getting into the country, but I can't see anywhere else where the sheer cost of getting it through customs is so high that the idea of home brewing works for you. So there you go. Please note, we are not doctors and the opinions are ours, is our view and is based on our experience and views on the topic. Our podcasts are for informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and the First Amendment applies.